Welcome to the studio with Kristoff Malejczuk. This is a very special episode. It is being recorded out of Sanford, Florida. Yes, I am in Florida now. I went through with my plans from Podcast 8. I am here visiting one of my closest friends, Graeme Koivu, with whom I suffered for 4 years in university, the University of Waterloo. He's living here for the time being. He's staying at his uncle's lake house, and he and his uncle were gracious enough to let me stay here as well. So I've been in Florida for 1 week at this point. I'm going to be staying for 1 more week before returning to my rented duplex in Boulder, Colorado. And another thing that's very special about this episode, aside from its much more eastern location compared to my typical recording studio, is that I have my first ever guest. Graeme is a guest on the studio today. This is by far the longest episode to date. Graeme and I recorded a conversation that we had. Its runtime is over 1 hour. Now, you might be thinking, okay, you recorded a conversation. Is this just another Joe Rogan experience? No. The studio with Kristoff Malejczuk aims to be far more than the Joe Rogan experience, and this aim is met successfully. There is much more meaning, depth, width, humor, and insight in this conversation than you will get from the majority of Joe Rogan's episodes. I think you guys will like listening to Graeme. I think we have good chemistry. I think we explore ideas. I think we have a good time. So I'm excited to present the conversation I had with Graeme Koivu. Without further ado, here it is.
Okay, so I want to say, Kristoff, I'm sure that some of your listeners probably know who I am. And if you do or if you don't, you can follow me on Instagram at Graeme Koivu. I'll let you figure out how to spell it if you're interested.
Hey man, you're giving away your information before the conversation even starts.
Yeah, I want to plug before people get turned off my ideas.
This is like when at the beginning of a YouTube video they're like and subscribe. It's like, how would I even know that I like this or want to subscribe?
Exactly. The more that they listen to me, maybe the less they'll like me. So I got to get that out there at the beginning.
Yeah. So in your ideal mind, like people would turn off the podcast now and start following you.
Absolutely. No, I'm actually very inactive on social media, and I wish I were more active because I think having that sort of being able to express your image in the most connected means possible, like through the internet to so many people, is a very, very useful in the world today.
Yeah, you're putting yourself out there. I mean, yeah, I guess I like to be active on Instagram, but I'm just trying to get fame.
Rich and famous is all that you need.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, I don't.
You're already halfway there on both of those things.
Yeah. And you're, I guess you're crypto rich.
Yeah, it's about the best I got going for me. Crypto rich. Mm-hmm. Except don't get carried away. That's an exaggeration. Some people are crypto super rich. I just barely made enough to quit my job.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, man. So I was thinking about how we had lunch with your cousin today, and he's a lot of crazy ideas. He's well, how would you characterize it? Like very paranoid.
Yeah, I think it's a paranoia, but it's not fearful paranoia. He just thinks that probably the people running the show who put out the news are trying to have so much control on people's actions.
Mm-hmm. If he's not fearful, what do you think he is? Like, clearly he's extremely mistrustful. What do you think his emotion is surrounding these theories? Because you're right. He doesn't seem scared, but he's certainly heavily invested in the truth. Like, he thinks that pretty much all media except for Fox is the devil, and they're trying to control us. He thinks that there's a lot of danger around vaccines, that COVID is overhyped. Like, he has these big theories, these ideas that the world is out to get him and others who love freedom.
Yeah, so I think he got his ideas from the echo chambers of Facebook. And we were mentioning at the lunchtime too, which is funny, that Facebook is probably a left-leaning corporation,
100%, yeah.
but the user base spreads right-wing ideas.
That's so funny. Yeah, they're like a platform of people who just love, like, probably even like somewhat radical left-wing ideas to propagate, and yet they're just platforming the far right. That's what all they're doing.
Yeah. And Mark Zuckerberg, he gets in a lot of trouble for this kind of stuff. He gets called out, and he gets bad publicity. I actually don't mind the guy. He does some things to try to avoid the spread of fake news. Like my cousin who we had lunch with, one time he made a post that shared information about vaccines.
What was this information?
The information was he shared a stat without any resources that
that 100% of people who got COVID died of other causes.
It was that out of the many millions of people who have been vaccinated, a significant number of them have died. Mm-hmm. So this is a terrible fact because, first of all, the people getting the vaccination in the beginning were already
close to death because they're old,
in worse health conditions.
Vulnerable categories.
And secondly, they didn't link the deaths to the COVID vaccine, but they just pay attention to the people that die. And the amount of people that did die was not statistically significant from the amount of people that should have died in the same population through the same amount of time.
Mm-hmm. Right, so it almost seems as though the vaccine was causing people to die less of random causes.
Yeah, it seemed like the vaccine was working pretty well. I commented on the post. I was like, thank you for reaffirming my confidence in the vaccine.
Was this the one that he was talking about, the Facebook, like, made only him, visible only to him?
Yeah, exactly. So this post, the default setting was visible only to him, which I think could have been true, and this is probably Facebook's way of curbing fake news spread across the platform, which they get a lot of heat for.
Yeah, if you have like the words vaccine or COVID and stuff, that they probably automatically change the default to only visible to you rather than what your standard default is, which is, I guess you set that. I think mine is, I actually set my own default to be only visible to me because I don't want to ever accidentally post something. I intend to never post on Facebook again.
Oh, yeah.
I think I didn't post for like 2 or 3 years, and then I posted after episode 3 of the podcast was released just to plug it. I'm going to plug this on every social media I have, but I mean, I'm so unengaged on Facebook. I don't have I don't have any interaction. I just don't want to be juggling these social medias, especially one that has like such a skewed old age right-wing demographic as Facebook.
Yeah, Facebook, they definitely walk the razor's edge in terms of ethical or non-ethical behavior. And one of my cousin's ideas is that it all comes down to money, and that's just what Facebook's doing. They're trying to make as much profit as possible for their shareholders, really. And some of their means of doing so maybe aren't so great.
Yeah, it's like corporations have a responsibility to make as much money as possible. So
yeah, they really do.
Yeah, money drives so many things, even beyond ethics, often. Wouldn't that be funny, man, if I just make Facebook the primary place that I try to advertise the studio, and I just end up having, I guess, like my primary demographic, which seems to be mostly men, which I don't understand. I wouldn't mind having a 50-50. I definitely don't think it's a male-oriented podcast. If anything, I would think women might flock to this podcast because I've received many compliments about my voice, and this podcast is my voice.
Yeah, well, maybe if you do a video podcast, then you'll attract more women to it so that they can look at you as well.
That's funny, man. I think if I had a video podcast, I would get more listeners in general. I think you just get a lot of YouTube hits if you have visual content.
Yeah, you're right. You definitely got a face for radio, so.
Man, that's false. I'm not gonna boost my own
That's a
looks,
joke.
but-
We're not gonna talk. We're not gonna rip on each other too much on here, but we're just here.
No,
having a
no,
good
it's
time.
for sure. It's good. You have to get a jab or two in. I mean, if anything, I inflate my own ego too much, so it's all right to occasionally bring it down a notch or two. What I was going to say though is it would be good if I switch all of my media over to Facebook. I have my my audience, which is I guess mostly young men and then young women, and international as well, getting a lot of traction in Brazil. But then I'd have a secondary demographic of just like 60-plus-year-old like alt-right Republicans.
And I think they would connect with your thoughts, because I listen to the Studio with Kristoff Malejczuk all the time. It's my favorite podcast.
Thank you.
And some of the jokes don't come off as jokes.
Yeah.
This is here I am feeling like the first guest on the podcast. I'm going to come express some opinions of people from the outside.
Oh yeah,
that don't get to be brought in otherwise.
Yeah.
So sometimes the jokes they're really good jokes, but you can't tell he's making a joke. So somebody who's is believing of the ideas spread through something like Facebook, they would certainly they'd be biased towards biased towards their own.
They wouldn't
beliefs.
get the joke. Yeah, because I tend to deliver jokes in the exact same tone of voice as I deliver my regular statements. So you can't tell they're jokes unless you understand that I'm being humorous.
Yeah, or hear him snickering in the background after he makes the joke.
Yeah, just like that.
That happens too.
You're referring to me in the third person right now, so I guess you're talking directly to my audience, which is fine. You can talk directly to them.
Oh.
But we can also have a conversation.
Hello, people of the hyperspace.
Oh, man.
Let me talk to Kristoff for a second.
Yeah, let's do that. Let's go back to that. Yeah, for example, if I were to make a comment, like I think someone who I'd be really interested in running for president in 2024, Derek Chauvin. That's clearly a joke. But some of these people I might get in my Facebook audience might think, that's not a bad idea. He has a really tough stance on crime. He really takes charge of the situation.
Yeah, and sometimes I feel almost like I need to help filter what jokes could be acceptable on the podcast. Because we were talking about the podcast and what could be discussed. You throw up a joke idea, I'm like, well, maybe this is a bit too edgy.
Like the fetus joke?
Like the fetus joke.
Okay, I might save that. I might save that joke for an episode you're not on.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was quite edgy. But I ride with it. So you think that your cousin began to get indoctrinated with some of this material through Facebook?
Yeah, it's hard to say exactly how it happened. In the beginning, when Trump got elected, he wasn't even a Trump supporter.
Yeah.
I think in the first year or two, he started believing the Trump side of things more, and that's all right. Like there's truths and falses on both sides of the aisle.
Mm-hmm.
But personally, maybe I lean more away from the Trump side. I think there's a lot of things he has done wrong that could be so obviously done better in a position like his, and he didn't do that very well. But my cousin, he's not so much that. He believes most of the opinions that are about as far right generalizing as you could go.
Mm-hmm. And he's interesting to hear talk to because I'm not exposed to those ideas too frequently. So I'm kind of on board with about 33% of what he says because he's very distrustful of the elites. He tends to think everything is about money, and he tends to think that it's all of the left is out to get people. I don't think that everything is about money, and I don't think that all of the left is out to get people. But I do have a distrust of the elites, and he does too, and we align there. But where he really lost me, we were talking about this in the car, is at the end of our lunch day, when he brought up that you don't think that the Earth is only 6,000 years old, and that Jesus Christ is the Son of God and like responsible for I don't know, the civilization we have today. I'm like, oh man, you've just like invalidated. Like, cause you had me 33% with all of your other ideas. I'm like, yeah, maybe there is some like conspiracy, some cabal of elites. There's Bohemian Grove, some sketchy stuff, the military industrial complex. Like I entertain some of those ideas, but oh, now you're a creationist too. Like, he shot himself in the foot.
Yeah, usually when I hear somebody having so many ideas, that's fine. Some of them make kind of sense, but as soon as you start throwing in like very ideas that are so far out that they are definitely not going to be true, then I'm like, oh yeah, I can't really, like, sure, your other ones might have been all right ideas, but I don't really want to believe them either anymore.
Hmm. Exactly, and I think one thing to look for is whether someone's ideas all correlate with each other. And if they do, that means there's a greater chance of them being indoctrinated from some ideology. They're not independent thinkers. So if you agree with, say, every single point that maybe a political party says, or that maybe some news figure says, or just that anyone says, if you agree with all of the ideas, then I tend to think you're not really a person. Like, these aren't your ideas. Like, I would have been much more likely to.
Yeah, you're a talking head at that point.
Yeah, exactly. You're just reading the teleprompter.
Yeah, reading the teleprompter,
Yeah,
drinking the Kool-Aid.
absolutely. It's like I would have been much more likely to be on board with all of your cousin's ideas if he had said these crazy things about the left and about freedom and about COVID, but then he also said, you know what's really important? We need to save the environment and protect trans rights. If he had said both of those things, I'm like, oh, actually, most people who agree with your crazy ideas don't support those two things. So the fact that you have these uncorrelated ideas makes me think that you're an actual person and that you actually think critically.
Yeah, I agree with that, and I am
Disagree.
speaking from my own opinion or my own experiences. I try to, I have ideas from both left and right politics. Probably, I'd lean right in terms of what I think capitalism is good for progression, but then I see it also doing a lot of damage to the world, and so I think there needs to be some sort of governance structure in place that can. We don't need the progression right now. We need kind of sustainability. So like, I feel, hopefully by your definition, then I'm not indoctrinated myself.
Mm-hmm. No, yeah, I think exactly what you're saying is right. Because you tend to, I think, be very pro-environment, more pro-environment than me. I mean, I obviously am pro-environment, but look, we're both eating a bit less meat than we used to eat, and one reason for you is the environment. Man, that's like 0% of the reason I'm eating less meat. I'm a bit of an outlier. I'm an outlier for being one of the people who eats the least meat but cares the least about the environment.
The environmental impact of meat eating, at least, because you do care about the environment otherwise.
Correct. Yeah. So I totally.
You are a lover of nature, as from what I've seen.
Like I picked up that Kool-Aid container. Speaking of Kool-Aid, when we went on that walk yesterday.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I care
That
about.
was nice picking up trash in a public park.
Absolutely.
So my reason for trying to eat less meat is because, well, my biggest reason is just the animal rights sort of thing. But my second reason, which is pretty significant, is the environmental impact. Third, then we got health benefits, and it's cheaper sometimes too. So there's like plenty of reasons for why. I try to stay away from animal products.
Yeah.
That aren't the same as everybody else's reasons.
For sure. Yeah, mine might be. I guess mine are effectively all morally based and fueled by Nietzsche. Nietzsche indoctrinated me into creating my own morality and then adhering to it.
Yeah.
That's nice.
I read Thus Spoke Zarathustra by Nietzsche as well. It's my favorite book even.
Yeah, how many times have you read that, man?
Oh, I'd read it for fun. I've probably read it 4 or 5 times.
Do you read Nietzsche for fun?
I read it for fun because that book is very poetic.
It's very fun,
I
isn't it?
haven't really studied it
It's just
so much.
It's a page turner. It's the exact opposite of that. It's dense, it's heavy, it's hard to interpret. Reading Nietzsche, reading this book...
I think what's neat about it is it's hard to understand. You need to realize his full repertoire of ideas and make all the connections to really understand Nietzsche. But myself, I read his book, and it's so open to interpretation. So you go in with your own beliefs, and you're like, oh yeah, this probably agrees with what I like.
You can find confirmation bias, right?
Yeah. So I'm just loving it. I'm like, oh, Nietzsche agrees with me. Makes me feel pretty good about myself.
Totally. That's actually exactly what the Nazis did. So Nietzsche's sister, I believe, was a fan of the Nazi Party, and then after he went crazy, because I think in the last multiple years of his life, he had some sort of psychotic break and couldn't look after himself properly. His sister published The Will to Power, which was just an ensemble of Nietzsche's notes. It wasn't something that Nietzsche intended for publication. Then it was just like totally adopted and misconstrued by the Nazi Party, because I think absolutely Nietzsche would not be in support of Nazi ideas whatsoever.
Yeah, I would guess that he probably wasn't. And yeah, they like to attribute the rise of the Nazis on his stuff, and it's because of his sister, and probably for the reason you said, and also him expressing the idea of the overman, and the Germans thinking they're like a superior race almost.
Exactly. Yeah. So they're kind of doing the same type of confirmation bias that you were saying, except instead of trying to commit a genocide against Jews, what is the confirmation you're finding? I guess just like confirmation of like different ways of living and
how to live through the world. I'm probably a little bit existentialist in that, I don't think there's any fundamental meaning in life. It's like you got to apply it on your own. And so, thus spoke Zarathustra is like, he came before they even called it existentialism. That I think Paul Sartre was the father of
French,
existentialism.
20th century French philosophy. Yeah, Sartre, Beauvoir, Camus, a bit. He's more of an absurdist.
Yeah. So Nietzsche was talking about the rise of a nihilistic wave that would oversweep like a nation when science tears down all these ideas that religion created.
Yeah.
And it disproved the possibility of religions.
Yeah. So Nietzsche was like he was very anti-religion, like anti-Christianity, which was I guess the dominant movement and morality, and kind of people had a way of living in Europe at the time that he was active, which would have been, I guess, 19th century Germany, that adhered to just like Christian ideas, Christian stories. Nietzsche thought that was all terrible, but on the flip side, exactly as you said, he was worried that if we abolished religion, this dangerous wave of nihilism would take over. So his solution to that was that everyone would need to construct their own morality, because obviously Christian morality guides us in a lot of ways. And also like nowadays, like society's not very religious, but we have we're born into a society that was constructed from Judeo-Christian values. If that's all removed, then where's the morality? So Nietzsche's, he cared about individual responsibility, which is probably why Peterson loves him so much. We need to take individual responsibility to create our own moral framework.
Yeah, I think Jordan Peterson does a good job of summing up many of the great philosophers' ideas and bringing them all back together and making the relationships between them that hold true. Once you try to make relationships between things that contradict, then the whole system breaks down. It's like looking for the theory of everything. And it seems like a lot of these philosophers came upon the same ideas of the like psychology of man and how to behave in a world without any fundamental meaning, really.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at a certain chain of philosophers, like certainly Peterson presents philosophers that tend to have a similar way of looking at the world. I think they're philosophers who would have quite opposing ideas.
Yeah, I guess that's true. And I'm definitely more understanding of like the Western philosophy.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't really know Eastern philosophy very well.
So I don't
say that I do.
I don't even know much British philosophy. I mean, man, I think John Hume is British. I don't even know his first name is John. Something Locke, Hume. Those people, I know next to nothing about them. I really know only a bit about Dostoevsky's hardly a philosopher. I know a bit about Nietzsche. I don't really know anything about Kant.
Right.
I don't know much.
Well,
I know way less than I want to.
Yeah. In fourth year, I took a class about machine intelligence, trying to learn about AI and how it could be useful in programming. And the professor is really smart. His name was Hamid Tizouche, but so he'd teach us about artificial intelligence. And one of the things he mentioned, though, not totally related to that, was that he thought that Western philosophy was superior to Eastern philosophy because Western philosophy tries to understand through thought what is the truth, whereas Eastern philosophy largely exhibits the absence of thought. And
it assumes the truth almost. It assumes like the proper mode of being.
Yeah, it's all searching for the now. Well, maybe Western philosophy does that too. That may not be the difference.
I'm not sure if Western philosophy does that too much. I don't think presence is overemphasized in the West.
Yeah, that's not my expertise. We mentioned the other day though, which is an interesting point. To live fully in the now, you need to disregard the future and the past, and that maybe monks are capable of this because without consciously thinking about it, they don't really have a future guiding them because their future will be the same as the now. It's meditation constantly, and so is their past.
So they never have to. They can live entirely at peace because they never have to have concern for the future because their future is determined.
Yeah, they aren't polluted by things that happened or things that they need to progress towards.
Yeah. And so monks sacrifice possibility for peace.
Yeah.
And I'm a fan of
Sacrifice
possibility.
potential for peace.
Potential, yeah, for sure. They just choose to maybe live fully in presence and love, which is great, but they sacrifice the unknown. And there's a lot of beauty in the unknown.
There is a lot of beauty in the unknown, but eventually to mature in society, you need to eventually sacrifice the unknown. You can only do one thing in life. You can't take on so many different virtues. Oh, and this is just one of the things that the Western philosophers talk about, Nietzsche and whoever else. It's that you need to prune your tree of possibilities essentially and like choose your direction
to a narrower place.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah,
so you can't be great at everything, but you can focus on one thing and do very well at it.
Exactly. It requires narrow expertise to succeed highly.
Yeah. In nanotechnology, we did just the opposite.
Yeah, I was about to say that. That's one of my biggest issues with our education.
We got a little bit of education about everything.
Yeah, and it was effectively useless.
Yeah.
What do you think the biggest benefit? The biggest benefit of our years of university, I'm going to say the top three things were strong foundation of mathematics, a like mediocre but at least existent introduction to programming, and maybe the most importantly, we suffered so much. I think the suffering just helped develop me so much as a person.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think the biggest thing we got out of it was being enslaved by the school system, and you need to go through some period of enslavement to ever really experience freedom. This is funny, Kristoff. You sent me a book for Christmas this year, the Gulag Archipelago.
Yeah, I sent it to you twice.
the book. I think you heard a message from the bookstore that it wasn't going to be sent on time, so the book would be late. But you're a nice guy. You sent me a second book and canceled the first one. Well, I ended up receiving the book late anyway, but I also received both books. So I didn't read each book. They were the same book. I did read one.
And you're going to say what the book was?
Well, the Gulag Archipelago.
By? Alexander Solzhenitsyn?
Yeah, Solzhenitsyn. So the interesting thing about the book is they talk about when the people in the gulags are eventually freed.
And what
they can't handle.
Hold on. What are the gulags?
The gulags are the prison,
the Russian prison,
kind of the prison
system
camps in Russia
for Russian citizens. Stalin imprisoned a ridiculous percentage of the population, starting from the late 1910s and ending in the 1960s. Stalin was dead at that point, I believe.
Yeah, and that probably helped liberate the people in the prison.
So there's this 40-year period where Russian citizens went to effectively concentration camps, which were typically in the more Arctic regions, and they were subject to starvation, extreme labor, torture, etc.
Yeah, so pretty much just the greatest suffering you can imagine.
Yeah.
And well, the interesting thing about this point in history, these concentration camps is unlike the German ones. The Russians were concentrating their own citizens, and this is Jordan Peterson's one of his biggest issues with socialism is that he thinks it leads to these problems where everybody is trying to bring like an equality from other people who they have to live with in the world. So
sorry, I don't quite follow what you're saying.
Yeah, so I'm not sure where it comes from, but it's maybe this isn't important because I can't describe it, so I'm not going to try. But the point of the book is at the end, the people are freed from the camps, and they can't handle
so these
the
people,
freedom.
these people who've been enslaved for like in so many cases over a decade with no freedom.
It's mostly the only life that they know.
Yeah. The only thing that's real, because like I guess their previous life is effectively a dream at that point. To them, it's so unreal. So then you're saying when they're released, what happens to them? When
they're released, they go off the deep end. They, I don't really know what they did exactly. I think maybe they, a lot of them probably commit suicide or went a little bit loopy, just not being able to exist as a free person. They needed the enslavement.
Because that enslavement was effectively them bearing an almost unfathomable burden.
Yeah, that would be like the greatest suffering to any freedom is going to be the greatest change that you don't really understand how to live anymore.
Yeah, it's like if you unnail Jesus to the cross, what's he gonna do? like the greatest possible burden has already been borne.
The greatest possible burden's been born.
And I think that's also why people are, after they maybe finish their career, they're very aimless. I think especially if you don't have kids, that's I think one big reason why I would like to have children is because it gives you continual purpose.
Yeah, for, at least 20 years, I would say. And then there is a time when then the kids leave the nest.
Yeah.
And it should probably be younger than 20 years.
Yeah.
But in today's day and age, it's not so easy to move on from a life with your family, but it's really something that people need to move away from eventually.
Because you need to adopt responsibility.
Yeah. This is so the suffering was one of the biggest things we got out of school, and it enforces responsibility. It imposes responsibility on you. The things that we learned, the best things we learned were programming. The worst thing we got was years of our life taken away, and a delay in when we are operating more independently. And this is one of the issues with society is I think you go to school until you're 22, maybe 26.
In your case, yeah.
And then you want to start up a career, and until you can financially support a family, you're already in your young 30s, which is 10 years beyond the age of when it seems biologically that people should be reproducing. Just because, age-related decline of genetic information.
Well, yeah, wait, so you think that because we go to school for the first 4-5 years after high school that we then start working at a later age, and then we're just like pushing back the time that we start families?
Yeah, everything's slowed down. It's like a expansion of youth, and it's not. You aren't adapting the full responsibility of an adult until you're already 30, And sure, youth is fun, but you need to step away from it. You can't live like a child forever.
Yeah, I mean, I'm under 30 right now, and I feel I'm more or less adopting the responsibilities of an adult, absent having a wife and children. That's a very large
Yeah,
part of it,
I think
though.
you are. I don't think everybody is.
Yeah, I was messaging this girl I know in Germany the other day. She's about my age, but she's studying to be a doctor, and she's still in school. Which is, I mean, I guess she's probably been in school for about 6 or 7 years now, and she's going to continue being in school for a couple more years. And she's talking about how she's applying for internships. Like, oh man, like I would have to off myself if I ever did another internship. That would be like intolerable to me.
Yeah, it depends what you're going for. If you need an internship to reach your greater goal,
That's true.
then
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
kind of annoying. But if you do an internship to get experience, just for the fun of it, then that could be a good time. But usually, before you can get an internship, you need the education.
Yeah. Also, she's studying to be a doctor, which is a higher goal than being an engineer, just based on what you need to do to obtain that.
Yeah,
So
which is funny because you need to trust both engineers and doctors.
yeah, I think, man, here's an opinion. I think we have way too much respect for doctors in society.
Um, I don't want to refute this opinion or reaffirm it because I haven't thought about it myself.
Okay, so here's I think, let me clarify a few things. Doctors, extremely important, very essential, more essential than many jobs. Although many jobs are very important in society. Doctors are certainly one of them. I think I want to make my statement far more precise than it was, because I said it very offhanded and callously, and did a very bad job of representing what I am actually trying to say. We often respect doctors heavily because we think they received a lot of education. And I think that is very misplaced. I think we should respect doctors maybe for choosing a career that is like enabling humans to live longer and live more happily. That's tremendous. It's very challenging. They suffer a lot in their job based on the hours they need to work. They're asked to do insane things.
Yeah, and the things that they have to witness. You know, they see a lot of people in bad situations.
Yes.
And
So tremendous stress. It's incredible. So I guess what I'm saying is, I am not impressed by a doctor's education.
Right. Yeah, and it depends on the type of doctor. They all need different educations. I'm probably not that impressed by a doctor's education either.
Man, now that I refined my statement, I realize my initial statement is so poor. Like, that's such a terrible. Yeah. I would. That's definitely not what I mean. Yeah, I'm just not impressed by doctors' educations. They effectively have 2 bachelor's degrees, a bunch of internships.
Yeah, they're probably overeducated, and it would be better if they started to specialize in their field, their specialty, at a sooner age.
Yeah, I don't really have an opinion as to whether they're overeducated. I just think the 8 years of school is like, good for you. I could have also been a student forever.
Yeah, if you do 8 years of school for something, then you better be ready to commit a long life afterwards to the same thing.
I hardly knew what I wanted to do until the final year. Until a final year of university, I didn't even really know what courses I wanted to take. It wasn't until 4th year that I really realized what I was interested in and what I wasn't.
Okay. That makes sense. In my 3rd and 3.5 years in is when I realized how important programming would be,
To Waterloo?
and focused on that. Yeah.
Okay.
So I really made sure to study that topic in later years. I think you did a similar thing, more
More through my job than
image
anything.
analysis sort of
Yeah,
work.
somewhat. Do you do much programming now?
Not right now.
Do you do any?
I was doing some programming at my last job,
Yeah.
and I could see myself doing it again in the future, of course.
Yeah, are you intending to work on any artificial intelligence for stock selection?
Yeah, eventually, I may check into that. A lot of people are doing that, you know.
Yeah.
There's so much money pouring into trying to understand where stocks will move. Here's an interesting way that some companies try to understand whether a stock will beat earnings or whatever, a company will beat earnings, like outperform expectations. They look through a satellite or through GPS data how many people are visiting a store or a place where currency is exchanged, essentially.
Yeah.
Where there could be trades made.
That's insane. Yeah. So if you, let's say, want to know whether or not to invest in Walmart, they're taking these satellite images, seeing how many people are going into Walmart versus maybe the past quarter or the past year.
Yeah.
If it looks like there's a big decline, then they might know before Walmart's earnings are released that Walmart is not doing so well. Maybe they should sell some puts.
Yeah. Or buy some puts.
Buy some puts, thank you. Yeah, I have no exposure to options trading except for one very reckless option that I played on Bed Bath & Beyond during the little GameStop funness. Didn't go well. It was a gamble, an irresponsible gamble. I lost very little money. But I need to become way more educated about that if I'm going to start messing with options.
Yeah, most of the time, probably leave that to experts unless you want to take a gamble, like some people do.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you can also figure out, see how many Domino's pizza boxes are in the dumpsters, and you've got a number of people going to a local Domino's, but, you know, that's global, so that's not the best way to figure it out, but I've heard of people trying to solve.
Yeah, people do
solve it
ridiculous
that
things. Going back to Nietzsche, you've read Thus Spoke Zarathustra about 5 times?
Yeah, probably like 4 or 5 times.
Have you read any other Nietzsche?
I was reading like Beyond Good and Evil. That
Really?
went a bit over my head.
Huh.
And in the book that I have, Nietzsche's book, it's like the portable library of Nietzsche.
Walter Kaufmann, one of the greatest translators of Nietzsche ever.
Yeah, so he must have done a good job. You know, I don't read it in Nietzsche's native language because I don't know German, but
Okay.
I like the English version. And in that book, I read a few of the other parts, excerpts from Twilight of the Idols, or what else would there
Genealogy of Morals.
be? The Genealogy of Morals.
Yeah. I'd like to read Beyond Good and Evil and on the Genealogy of Morals. Those were both published after Thus Spoke Zarathustra, and I've heard they do. Thus Spoke Zarathustra is very similar to the Bible. Not that I've read the Bible, but in the way that it's parables. It's stories, and you need to decipher what is trying to be said. It's absolutely philosophy, but it's told in a narrative format.
Narrative, yeah.
Whereas Beyond Good and Evil on the Genealogy of Morals aren't stories. Like Thus Spoke Zarathustra follows this character Zarathustra, and he experiences different things, and everything is pretty much a metaphor. Whereas in these other books, these later books, he develops a lot of the ideas that he presented in Thus Spoke Zarathustra, but in a more well-developed, well-rounded, concrete format.
Yeah, like in a writing more akin to a scientific publication almost. But you know, it doesn't have references. Well, he probably does have references and citations. But I also said I didn't read too much of his other books, but it's definitely not a story of a character moving through space and time.
Yeah. One thing that I am very undereducated in relative to what I would like to know is philosophy. Like, I would love to have read a lot more of the great thinkers of the West. And I have really only read Dostoevsky, Nietzsche. I'm going to be reading a bit of Karl Marx. A few other authors I have lined up to read. But this is, to become educated in this, I feel like I would need to effectively take on multiple years. Effectively get, I'm saying effectively way too much. I'm going to stop saying effectively.
Okay.
What's the synonym of effectively?
Essentially.
Or I could just leave out the word. I'm tossing in this 4-syllable adverb, which adds nothing to what I'm saying. It's just a filler word. It's like saying Me saying effectively is just as bad as saying I just chose a word that sounds more well-spoken than
Yeah, essentially.
Yeah. So in actuality, what I'm trying to say is,
I know that you'd like to know more philosophy.
Mm-hmm.
I would as well. I have not studied it myself, really. I had one class in university,
existentialism, right?
the existentialist experience, and it maybe had the best impact on my life out of all the classes that I took.
Crazy.
And it was one of the hardest classes because the exams were essay based.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not too quick at writing ideas.
So my question to you is going to be maybe the thing that I feel most undereducated in relative to what I would like to know would be philosophy. What's something that you think that you're undereducated in relative to what you would like to be far more knowledgeable about?
It would be maybe relationships.
Okay.
Relationships with people. I'm a bit of a introvert type person. I can have extrovert times too, but I don't maintain relationships very well. I'm not very good at communication.
Wow. That's
But
really
I don't
open
know
of
if
you
it's
to say.
something worth studying. It's not a point of study like philosophy, but it's something that can be learned and practiced.
Yeah, it's more like observation, awareness, and behaving with intention.
Yeah, and you study philosophy, you should apply philosophy too, right?
Mm-hmm, absolutely.
Like obviously, I'd like to know more philosophy as well.
Man, it's very open of you to say to talk about how you feel might be lacking in that area.
Yeah, well, it is what it is. I'd like to bring up a point from kind of philosophy, but what we were talking about earlier,
Yes.
if possible.
Yes.
Because I was reading Modern Man in Search of a Soul.
Who wrote that?
Yeah, the name's escaping me.
Okay, I can look it up really briefly.
So, in the book, earlier we were discussing my cousin and how he's a little bit in a bubble of right-wing ideas.
That's Carl Jung.
Carl Jung, yeah.
You've read Jung?
Yeah,
That's incredible.
Yeah, I read that book.
Wow. How long is it?
It's
A few hundred pages?
Yeah, probably a couple hundred.
When did you read
If
this?
that. It would have been about a year ago.
Wow.
So there's something really interesting in the book. Is it's so easy for us to sort of dispute a kind of very conspiratorially minded individual. We could easily come from where our place of origin is, like Canada mainly, and have our biases from our past experience. And it's easy to see how somebody who's thinking conspiratorially, living in maybe Florida, could have their own sort of understanding of reality. So in the book, Jung discusses the primitive man, who is essentially a person in a tribal person, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
So a tribe that hasn't had contact with, they haven't studied science or had much contact with people. They could believe in a witch doctor, these types of things. So for a person like that, they see an improbable event happen, and then the next day maybe they see a different improbable event happen. And if another improbable event happens, then to them that would make so much sense. But to somebody like us, we would not make any connection between those things happening because there isn't any scientific foundation for, or any cause and effect linking
they're
the
independent
events.
random events.
Yeah, but for somebody who has a different understanding of reality than ourselves,
They might link them together.
then these could be the most obvious thing that should have happened.
Mm-hmm.
So we can discuss about how other people, maybe they're in their Facebook bubble, and it would be easy to think that that isn't the truth from where we're coming from.
Yeah.
But for them, it probably works out just fine.
Yeah, totally. I mean, if you are obsessed with the idea that there is a conspiracy amongst elites to take away your freedom, and then certain measures are put in place to protect public health during a pandemic, you are going to completely disregard any of its effects on public health and focus solely on how it's infringing upon your freedom. And it's going to just line up totally with what your thoughts are.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's kind of an interesting way to think about that. Since we were talking about philosophers and people's ideas, people's opinions.
Yeah, it's funny that the course that was the most useful and impactful to you throughout university was your philosophy course, because I think we only had about 6 electives in all of university that were non-engineering courses, which is very few across across 8 semesters of education, we only had 6 individual courses that weren't in engineering. But the courses that had the biggest impact on me were also not engineering courses. I think my public speaking course was probably the one that I got the most out of.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Because
I didn't know that would be your biggest impact, but
yeah, like I was
definitely the ones once we left the engineering bubble were so useful, and I didn't like that they made us go through course electives that aren't related to our field of study, because I don't think, here we are paying for our education, we should get to choose our own what we want to learn, but they want engineers to be well-rounded, so we take these electives so we can understand more to the world than just truth from science.
Yeah, I mean, I think fundamentally there is value on having everyone be somewhat well-rounded. You're coming from a background where you were just maybe already going to be somewhat well-rounded. You have an interest in reading, in finance, in various different things. I think a lot of people maybe need some well-rounding. The only impact is that everyone treated the electives as being a complete joke. I didn't care whatsoever. So these impacts, like the effort of the engineering program to make us well-rounded was just so useless. Was people taking bird courses, trying to get the highest possible marks and not caring at all about what they were learning in general.
Yeah, sure. There are some people that needed the rounding more than others.
Yeah. Some people needed a lot of rounding, man.
Yeah, the people who were maybe more social outcasts and really stuck with stuck in the books.
It's like the people who were more successful in the engineering courses were the people who needed the engineering courses less. And they needed the roundedness more. But then again, you should also go deep in what you're very good at, as we were alluding to earlier.
Yeah. Yeah, you should focus on one thing and be really good at it. I think that's a chapter in Jordan Peterson's book that I haven't read.
His latest book?
Yeah.
Okay. Oh man, yeah, I haven't made too much progress on that. I'm not reading here in Florida. This doesn't strike me as a land in which to educate myself.
This is the place to get the other point of view, maybe.
Yeah, totally. I am
like when we went to a bar last night that was not COVID friendly.
Man, that exceeded my my risk comfortability by some margin. The only issue is that it was really, really fun. But yeah, that was it was just a dance floor, and we were there to watch the UFC fights. So we weren't interacting with people.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess I did get on stage with the DJ and dance, but that was pretty socially distant. It was a moderate-sized stage, and I wasn't close to 2 other people,
Yeah,
except
you were
for
farther away from the actual crowd, I guess, if you're on stage.
Yeah, it was far safer for me to be dancing on stage. Also very fun.
But the bartenders definitely weren't wearing masks, and nobody else was, except for one person.
Whoa, yeah, there's that one woman on the dance floor with a mask, and so good for her.
Yeah, that's
for doing that. That was really impressive. She
that's brave, or maybe it was just for style.
I don't think it was for style. It was good. Maybe she lives with her grandmother or something.
Yeah, and that's already a little bit irresponsible.
It's super irresponsible. Yeah. Well, what I found so funny is at the bar we were at before that, because we went to 3 different bars, because, we're little party animals.
We're on a vacation here.
Yeah, absolutely. Is at the first bar, the Belgian place, the waitress would wear her mask, except when she talked to us, then she would pull the mask underneath her chin.
Yeah, and the other waitresses wouldn't wear masks either, altogether.
Oh, yeah, and that guy there said I looked like Andy Samberg, which you disagree with. And I mean, I'm not too attached to looking like him, but he's somewhat talented, fairly talented, pretty successful.
Yeah, I like the guy's comedy.
I think the similarity might be in the nose.
Could be. Looking at you now.
Yeah.
And the second bar that we went to was inside a furniture store with very overpriced furniture that they probably tried to sell wealthy and intoxicated people.
Intoxicated for sure. Yeah, it was like there was a table there. It was, I think, $995, and it looked like it needed a lot of work. Some things are old and they have charm because they're old. This was old and it was lacking charm because it was old.
Yeah, there were things there that you would have to pay me to take. Like, I don't want to acquire things. I'm trying to get rid of things. Isn't that what Jesus did too?
Did he get rid of
Relinquish all your possessions and you'll understand.
What were you
Peace and love, really.
Okay, yeah. I mean, I think some of the most important things are completely immaterial. Well, actually, that's such a non-statement. It's so obvious that the most important things are like love, maybe just love. Health. Oh, yes, health, totally. And money helps with that for sure. It's nice to have some cash lying around.
Yeah.
It's so easy to talk about how unimportant money is when you actually have money.
Yeah, the best thing about money is that it can buy time. And
Yes.
I was working a job recently where I was making less money than I felt that I was worth. And fortunately for me, maybe unfortunately for the company, I value time more than money. So I left the job.
Yeah, nice. You constructed your own morality. You didn't adhere to the societal framework of having a job working for someone else. And then you adhere to that morality. Nietzsche would be quite pleased.
Good to hear. I love to know that I'm pleasing my one of my inspirers, Nietzsche. I think there is maybe a story in the Bible though where God tells a rich person to get rid of all their possessions.
Okay. Did he do it?
I never read the whole Bible, so this is probably true, but I've only read Genesis, and that's a great story.
Yeah, I think most people I know who are religious have read far less of the Bible than you have read, and you are not religious.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I love allusions to biblical stories in my artwork, whether that be, literature, paintings, movies,
the Bible is like
songs.
One of the earliest guides to how to live properly.
Yeah. It's a long-running story that's gone through so many iterations and really become something, maybe the most special book ever.
Yeah, I recall at one point, probably still, J.K. Rowling's Harry Potter series was the third best-selling thing. She was the third best-selling author of all time. It was number one was the Bible. I don't know how they categorized author in this case, but I guess the Bible was the number one best-selling book. Then it was the complete works of Shakespeare, and then it was J.K. Rowling's Harry Potter series.
Oh, wow. Yeah. I didn't know that. I wouldn't have never guessed that Shakespeare's was up there.
I guess that just speaks so much to how much English there is in the world, I think. Because presumably in most languages spoken in the developed world, there would have been authors of similar caliber of Shakespeare. But I think the success of the English Empire has led to Shakespeare's much grander propagation.
Yeah, Shakespeare is somebody that I actually have not read myself.
Okay. Oh, you surely read him in school when you were forced to.
Yes, but I didn't understand it.
Okay. See, I started reading Hamlet at home when I was home for Christmas in 2019. We had the volume at home, and it was amazing. I was so enraptured with it. I thought it was great. I was taking notes. I wasn't just reading it, I was kind of studying it. And then I fly back to California and didn't continue. So the only Shakespeare I've read by myself are the first 2.5 acts of Hamlet, and despite my great enjoyment of it, I didn't continue reading it, which is one of the most idiotic things I can think of. Hamlet is often looked at as one of Shakespeare's greatest works. I was getting a lot of enjoyment out of it, and I would say, it was beyond enjoyment. It's not just like watching some comedy starring Seth Rogen. You can actually get a lot more out of Hamlet. And then I didn't continue reading it. So in Boulder, I have it on my bookshelf. I purchased it, and I need to make some more progress on that.
Yeah, it's a book I could read sometime too. But there's so many books that we can read. We can't read them all.
Oh, speaking of Shakespeare, man, I bought his sonnets. I'm going to have a podcast that centers around Shakespeare, but it's going to be much more engaging than just talking about Shakespeare. There's going to be flair. I don't want to say controversy because I never aim to be controversial, but it's going to be fun. It's going to be a fun episode. I was reading Shakespeare's sonnets, but I don't want to say too much more. But look, we're both really into rap, right? We're hip-hop culture. Maybe not hip-hop culture for you so much, but definitely enjoy good wordplay, good lyricism.
Sometimes. Actually, wordplay is one of the things that I sometimes don't like about rap because it breaks the fourth wall and removes the experience of the song. It kind of brings the artist into it and shows them as a person instead of just hearing the music.
Oh, because it's almost like they bring awareness to themselves by striving for excellence in penmanship.
Yeah, and being clever, I guess. And sometimes I don't mind that in my songs, and I think it is intelligent. And there's non-rap songs do it occasionally as well. But that's one of the issues that I have with rap is when it's done. It's when it's overdone.
Okay.
But there are aspects of the art that I'm into.
What I was going to say is that the Shakespeare sonnets are like the OG greatest rap, for sure. It's so good. I mean, the sonnets are so good, man. Like, if I were reading those to a woman, I would be shocked if she didn't fall in love with me. But I guess I'd have to have written it myself. Shakespeare could have easily gotten half of English-speaking 16th century Europe to fall in love with him, maybe 15th century Europe, whenever he was alive.
Yeah, well, language is a powerful tool.
Yes. You're into Chomsky?
Yeah, I listen to Chomsky.
Okay.
I have not read his works, but he's probably the most famous linguist of all time.
Very cunning guy.
One of the most cited people.
A cunning linguist. The only Chomsky video that I can recall, actually no, I've seen a couple Chomsky videos. I've seen him talk more recently about the war in Iraq, but I don't want to listen to some 93-year-old guy talking about the war in Iraq. So, I mean, he probably has good ideas. The Chomsky video that I do recall watching is a conversation between him and Michel Foucault, the 20th century French philosopher they had, which was a crazy thing. So it's this meeting of great minds, two of the greatest thinkers of the 20th century, having this discussion in front of an audience, just like this big crowd, just purchase tickets to hear them talk. That's cool.
He always has interesting things to say, and I have to mostly, for the most part, believe what he says because he knows so much more than myself. So I trust his opinions.
Yeah. Yeah, that is someone who is knowledgeable and intelligent. That brings with it a lot of ethos, so you can end up trusting more outlandish things more easily because you know there's a higher probability of it being correct.
Yeah, I guess that could be the case. And it's funny with Chomsky because he's a linguist, but he knows so much about politics, and that doesn't really go back to language so obviously.
Yeah.
But ultimately, I guess it does because political beliefs are spread through language, and I'm sure he could make that relation, and it probably does. So it's good to hear. Like, I don't listen to him for his topics on language as much as I do for his opinions on the global state of affairs, really.
That's kind of like Dawkins, Richard Dawkins. He became famous for publishing The Selfish Gene, which is a book on biology. And I would like to be able to summarize what it's about, but I can't. I think that he believes that Darwinism can apply at the level of genes, not just at the level of species. I think that is what he is introducing
Okay.
with that book. Because Darwin had evolution at the level of like creatures, individuals, but he thought it applied to a more cellular level. So I think there have been a lot of critiques of that book. However, it was certainly a book that had a lot of impact on biology when it was published in the second half of the 20th century. So despite being famous for that, the only reason people ever listen to him talk now are to hear his stance on religion.
He's one of the predominant atheists.
Yeah. I used to listen to him a lot in high school. I went through this phase in high school where I was listening to all these atheists talk, like Dawkins. That was my exposure to Sam Harris. I listened to Christopher Hitchens. All of those people I was listening to.
Wow, me as well, actually. Except it wasn't for high school, but it was probably the same years because I was out of high school a couple years before you. So these are the same years that the atheists got a lot of attention on the internet, and it was easy to listen to their stuff, and I was like way into it as well. Nowadays, I'm not so strong on the atheist side because it's too absolute in thinking that there's nothing more. I guess agnostic about that.
Yeah, man, I probably used to label myself as an atheist, but man, I'm such not so certainly my views have matured since then as I have grown older and been exposed to more content and more ideas. Amazingly, I think the person who had the greatest impact on how I would self-identify relating to religion is someone who I don't have too much respect for. It's Neil deGrasse Tyson. He was asked...
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. He was on, I think it was the YouTube channel Big Think or Think Big.
Okay.
They sometimes get these thinkers on, and he was asked about his view on that, and he said, well, really, I think it just doesn't matter. So many great minds spend way too much time thinking and talking about that when they could be doing other things. I'm like, oh, wow. So it's so useless to be some militant atheist. So then I don't ascribe a label to myself whatsoever.
Yeah, that's probably a good idea, not to identify with a label unless you want that to become your the greatest factor of your identity.
Yeah. And it's some labels are very boring to have ascribed to you.
Which ones do you think might be boring labels to have ascribed to you? I think a lot of labels get a lot of hate, and it's unwarranted. Like vegans get labeled and hated for it. Atheists get labeled and hated for it.
Here's a boring label.
And I don't think either of them deserve that.
Democrat, Republican, such boring labels. Those bore me to death.
They are, but it's the way the government operates. So you're forced to choose one of those essentially.
Yeah, but you don't need to identify, right? Like you're kind of in the same way you're forced to choose what your beliefs in God are. I mean, I'm forced to, but you kind of do have beliefs, but you're not forced to ascribe a label to yourself.
Oh yeah, yeah, that's a good point.
What are labels that you would describe yourself as? For example, I would describe myself, some labels that I would not reject, that I might even choose to describe myself as, would be engineer, poet, artist, athlete. The last one might be slightly optimistic, but also sometimes you need things to be in your head. Like if I believe I'm an athlete, I'm going to behave like an athlete, and I think I live more or less like an athlete. But anyhow, so what are some labels that you would toss on yourself?
Yeah, some labels for myself. I would also do artist, chef,
Oh,
philanthropist,
chef.
retail investor.
Philanthropist?
No, those were all jokes. No,
That's
except
so
for artist.
funny. That's so
I
funny.
do believe in living life
Yep.
as a blank canvas, and all that we do is a form of art. Not all that we do,
A lot.
and some of it negligibly, but the way you walk down the street under the eyes of the public, you have to express yourself when you move through.
You're
through
painting
life.
a picture.
Yeah.
When you walk. When you
The
walk down
clothes
the
that you
street.
wear.
Yeah. It's all the picture. You're painting. You're painting all the time.
Yeah, it's a facade.
It's I would like to have no facade. I would like to express myself as authentically as possible.
Yeah, that would be ideal. And I think you have a good way of getting there through your podcast and however else but the podcast I mentioned specifically because we're on it, but also when you can express your ideas in long form, then people with enough time can understand where you're coming from. If you just express a single idea, well, that doesn't give you really any perception into the person's self.
Yeah, it's like, so if you behave, let's say, authentically when you walk down the street, you're still being equally as authentic, but with the podcast, it is authenticity in much greater depth and breadth.
Yeah, it's like if you walk down the same street every second week, right? So people become familiar with who you are.
Every second Monday at midnight, for example, which is when I would love to have this released.
Yeah, so frequent a place and you can understand that person frequenting the place.
And everyone sees that person walk by every week, and he might have a different outfit on.
The first week, they're a stranger.
Yeah, she might be walking in a slightly different way, but if they're always just walking down that street and being themselves, you're going to get an idea.
Yeah, they can wear different outfits. They can be hunched over one day if they're feeling down, or they could have just had uplifting news and be standing tall. And if you only see them one time, then that's your belief of them. But if you see them in all their forms, then you have an understanding for the individual.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, life is art, and we're living it.
Yes, we're artists. And that's a pretty good place to end this episode, I think.
Yeah, I had a good time.
Thanks for being the first guest, man. This is awesome. I'm very pleased to have you as the first guest.
Oh, well, I appreciate that, and I'm honored to be the first guest.
There's only one other person that I would have liked to have had maybe as a first guest.
Who's
realistically obtainable? Nasser Abukadir. He was one of our professors. We had a very interesting relationship, but I think he has no desire to be on the podcast. Although we do have phone calls sometimes, and I'll leave that at that. So Graeme, you gave your social media handles at the beginning of this conversation.
That's right. So if you did follow me, please unfollow me now that we've reached the end.
Yeah, or you can stay subscribed to Graeme or following Graeme, as I'm sure he's not going to clutter your feed. He doesn't post much content at all.
No, but even if I don't post, slide into my DMs and we can have a conversation.
Yes. Maybe even a call. People should follow you on Instagram, and they should call you. Using Instagram is calling me.
Hey, I would love to talk. I'd love to talk. Correct me if I said anything false on this podcast, please.
Oh yeah, that's absolutely true. And Graeme, if people want to follow me, how can they do that?
Well, they can follow you on Instagram at Malejczuk, MALEZCJUK.
Wrong. Close. All the right letters in the wrong order. Follow me at Malejczuk. That's my last name. At MALEJCZUK. Don't be shy. You can also send me a DM, leave a rating, leave a review. Tell your friends. Tell your neighbors. Tell the barista at your coffee shop. Do that. Say, hey, I'm listening to the craziest thing. Just be nice. You can then develop both a relationship with the barista and introduce some great content into their life. So thank you for listening to The Studio with Kristoff Malejczuk. I was joined today by Graeme Koivu. Take it easy.
Bye.